It started with a game.
If everyone would like just bag the noise and play like we could do this.
Sonny, name one thing that's gotten better in the last 10 years.
Shall we play a game?
Video games.
All right, I acknowledge that.
Totally awesome video game!
Back to class. Congratulations. You made it this far. Okay, you've watched a couple videos. We talked about story seeds. We talked about story treatment. You've been following along with my examples, but hopefully developing your own story. We're in the pre-design phase of constructing this narrative for a video game. And I wanted to sort of, with this video, I didn't necessarily plan on having this video as part of the course, to be honest. Okay? I'll be really honest with you with this video. I was just going to do story seed, treatment, plotting out the narrative design, walk through, super important, and then, talk about dialogue a little bit, and that's it. Let you go. And we'll talk a little bit also about, I'll give you all the advice I have about breaking in as a game writer that I can think of. And I realized that this video is really important. Although I don't have as much to say. I'm not as prepared. And you say, well, you haven't been prepared at all. You don't look very prepared for any of this. But okay, fair. But I may be a little bit, especially underprepared for this one. And bear with me and I'll explain to you why. You have probably noticed that taken as a whole, the game industry as a whole, when we play, games, and we look at games, and we look at the ones that have sort of a story experience, like a real narrative, not sandbox games, okay, and not games necessarily where you're playing an empty vessel, where it's first person, and you're playing this this character that never talks, okay, doesn't have a name. But for a lot of games where we have a story and we have a protagonist that you as the player get to sort of be in their shoes. As a whole, the game industry hasn't done a great job of drawing characters, right? Like we get, the industry gets criticized a lot, and I'm part of the industry, and I've been part of the industry since 2001, so I have to take some of the blame. And I'm a game writer, right? But a lot of our characters are cookie cutter clichés. Okay, it's a fair criticism, all right? And there's different reasons why. It's hard to point to any one reason. There's been a lot of talk about a lack of diversity within the field of game design and game writing and that kind of stuff. And that is a reason, that is a factor. I'm not at all dismissing it or waving my hand at it. I do want to talk about, however, I think a factor that doesn't get talked about much indirectly when we're talking about characters and the lack of, the sort of the top of mind cliches that we keep seeing over and over again. And that is time. When you're in a professional environment, like every week in game design feels like a month somewhere. It's light speed. The minute you start a project, you're already way behind. And it's always this exercise of trying to get 3 years worth of stuff done in like 2 years, right? There's been a lot written about crunch time and the long hours and stuff like that. I won't go to all those reasons. I won't bring that into the discussion. But games are hard, right? You don't have a lot of time. Even if you've never worked in the industry before, you can imagine if you were to sit down and talk to the studio head and the executive producer of your project and the lead artist and the head of engineering and all these people and say, look, everybody, we've made some progress, but I really need to sit down and consider this cast of characters, and I really need to make sure I take the time to get to know them so that they can be individuals and not just cliches. So that, you know, that they're three-dimensional, so they feel authentic, they feel like real people, so that we care about them, all of them. They're, you know, whatever. Even if we're not sympathetic, they're just, you know, we care about these characters in one way or another. They feel real. So let's shut the studio. Everyone just shut the studio down for a week or two, everyone gets paid, and I'll just noodle away at this, and I'll let you know. Right? Being in the game developer can be frustrating, because sometimes it feels like you, even as you gain a lot of experience and wisdom, you make the same mistakes over and over again because you're in a rush. Most often you're in a rush. Now, of course, there's lots of games with, you know, brilliantly drawn characters, but we're talking about the vast majority of games and you know that have come out in its history, and you know, it's clear it's not a strength of the game industry. And I'm going to be perfectly honest with you, I don't know that if it's a strength of mine. I don't know that I can say that, because I haven't spent a ton of time at it. Over the years, I certainly have worked on it more and more, but I almost didn't even think to make this video. And this video is so important because it is, I'm letting you know we need to hit the pause button a little bit and think about our characters. Think about your character for your story. Okay, before we go too much further. Games tend to be event driven, and we don't have a lot of time. So when you don't have a lot of time, think about if you were mugged. Not for your money, your phone, but for an idea. Okay, so you're sitting on a park bench just having a sandwich, smiling, grinning from ear to ear because it's a beautiful day. And someone pops out from behind a tree with a knife and says, give me the idea for a protagonist for a futuristic first-person shooter. And you're scared, you're panicked, and you're like, I don't have one. I swear I don't have one. And they're, you know, it's not good enough. Out comes the knife, and they start walking towards you, and you're like, okay. Guy with you know, lean, bustly guy, black hair, 5 o'clock shadow, chip on his shoulder, axe to grind, ex-special forces. Just the first thing on the top of your head. And the person mugging you would probably be like, it's a little cliched, but it'll do. Okay. You live you live to fight another day. You just spit out the first thing you could think of and went with it. That's an exaggeration, kind of, but it happens. You, as the writer, have to take responsibility, no matter what anyone else is asking from you. You have to take the responsibility to flesh out these characters so they're not cliches, and you have to get to know them really well. And you got to do that early, because concept art is going to be drawn, and you know, characters are going to be modeled in 3D most likely, or whatever, and voice actors will be cast, and they'll be sending out snippets of dialogue to places where actors can read them. And that process starts pretty early. Now, I know, you know, I didn't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, and I'm talking about, you know, the professional environment. And what we're doing here is we're not stressing. We're just working on this sort of hands-on, easy, simple system to get you going, and get you to, you know, get you to build a portfolio, break into the industry. So we're not stressed, but it just bears mentioning. It's important. I don't think you'll, unless you have a great mentor, you probably won't be encouraged to do this. You have to take it upon yourself to do this. Now, as with, I think, almost all the videos here, I'm going to give you a framework to work on. Okay, there's tons of books written by much more qualified people than me about how to, draw characters, create characters. Okay, hopefully you're seeking that knowledge, like I spoke about in my video. My recommended reading video. You're sharpening the axe. You're always learning from playwrights and screenwriters and television writers and video game writers who have written books, and you're reading. So there's a ton of material out there for you. I'm going to point you just to one. This guy, Lajos Egri, okay? Playwright from Hungary, born towards the end of the 19th century, lived until like the 1960s, okay? And he's written two books, well, maybe more than two, but he's written The Art of Dramatic Writing, which I have here, and The Art of Creative Writing. I can't remember if I've actually read this one. I did read this one, because this is one of those books that gets talked about a lot by writers and recommended a lot. These old school playwrights, man, they really knew their stuff. It's a little bit of a tough read. I mean, it's a little dense. Great stuff, but I won't say it's like an easy read or anything like that, but probably worth going through. And in this book, he has an exercise, and he calls it the bone structure of a character. So even though parts of it are a little dated, I thought this would be a great exercise to recommend. And I'll have it here in the video, and I'll put a link to it. I didn't want to necessarily, I wasn't sure if how I felt about posting it on my Google Drive for people, because it felt like I was crossing the line a little bit into piracy. But if other people did it, and I'll just post a link to their site, and then I'll wipe my hands of it, right? Anyway, I'll throw it up here in the video so you can take a look. But it is, I think, a pretty good exercise to begin. It's an exercise that'll just get you thinking. I don't think it's an exercise where you just do it and you're like done. You're like, okay, I know this. I know my character. I think it's exercise you start working on, and it'll really help you get to know these people and just start to be thinking about it. Some of these things are a little dated. You could obviously update some of these. What newspapers or magazines do they read? Yeah, again, Hungarian playwright of born in the 1800s. Okay. But there's a lot of good stuff here. And what I like about it is this is not like a D&D character sheet where you have stats. Not that that's like terrible to do if you really want to. And maybe you got to know how strong somebody is. That's fair. We're talking physiology, sociology, and psychology. Really get to know what makes this person tick, what drives them. Because people don't always know themselves, right? What do they think they want? What do they really want? That kind of thing. Again, a lot of the books that I've already recommended. We'll talk about drawing characters. There's a lot of great information out there. But if you take one thing from this video, it's you got to think about it. You got to be purposeful, and you got to make the time. If you're working with a team, nobody's got to know. And you got to do that before, voice actors are cast and concept art gets drawn, and because you want to collaborate with all these people to make sure that, and if you become the authority on the character, people will come to you, right? I'll give you an anecdote. It's not mine, but Dustin Hoffman is an actor. He's won a couple Academy Awards, considered a very, very, very good actor of his generation. And I think I was watching him being interviewed somewhere. Might have been the actor's studio or something like that. But apparently when he was really young, living in New York, he was cast in the Fruit of a Loom commercial. If you're at all, maybe you don't know, Fruit of a Loom is a brand of underwear for men. I think mostly that's what they do. I think they're still in business. They make underwear for men. The brand is Fruit of the Loom. And they had these mascots. It was like a grape, a raisin, an apple, something else. I can't remember. Lemon or something. I don't know. And they would make all these commercials all the time with actors dressed up as the 4 pieces of fruit. I think it's 2 grapes. 2 grapes, a raisin, an apple. Well, Dustin Hoffman, he's cast as, I think maybe the apple. And apparently he got into it with the director. He's like, okay, what, who am I? And the director says something to the effect of, well, what do you mean? You're an apple. It doesn't matter. You're an apple. And Dustin Hoffman couldn't accept that. He's like, no. I'm not apples. I'm not some apples in general. I am a specific apple. I'm a specific apple from a specific tree. I am a specific type of apple. And that tree was somewhere, you know what I mean? It was maybe by a river, or was it in an orchard, or was it, growing wild in the forest, or was it in a yard with kids and a family picnicking underneath it? Who specifically am I? And that had to be a real joy for the director, right? Who just wants to film this underwear commercial and get to the bar. But he had a point. Now, he's taking his craft seriously. He's not playing apples in general. Apples as a concept. He's a specific apple from a specific tree in a specific place. And that matters to that apple. Just as, a protagonist isn't just this, shouldn't be probably this amalgam of, lone wolf, axe to grind, chip on his shoulder, special forces guy. It's fine. It's cool if you're making a military first-person shooter, to have one of these ex-special forces guys. But who is he? Where did he come from? What's his history? What's his people? What does he believe? What drives him? What makes that person unique? So, I realize I'm not giving you a lot of, great practical advice, but I think this video is really important. It's important for me to make, and hopefully if you're, following along with this, important for you to understand that if you want to make characters that people remember, care about, you got to put some real time into making them, 3-dimensional. Think about the characters, just very recently, as of this recording, HBO started releasing episodes of their oh my God, Neil Druckmann and Naughty Dog's, was it Last of Us? Right, yeah, Last of Us. Which I really like. I really like the first one. I really like the second one. I know a lot of people had problems with things about it, but however you feel about it personally, people care about those characters a lot. They're passionate about them, fans. And I haven't seen the HBO series yet, but the word on the street is that it's amazing television. And Neil Druckmann, who's a creative director for the second one, and I was sure involved, I think, in the first one. I don't remember his job title on the first one, but is really involved with the show, and I think directed at least one of the episodes, maybe more. Those characters are on the star of an HBO show because they're interesting and people care about them and want to see them, outside the context even of the game, they want to see them. It's not just that the video game was a huge hit, because you can think of other video game franchises that are huge, and we never see those protagonists elsewhere because they're just stuffed shirts. Or if we do see them, those shows don't do very well because there's nothing there, right? And I won't name names, because that's mean. I'm not a critic. but you can think of some. All right, that's all I got for this, but there's some homework for you. I'm not going to do this. I didn't do this. I'm not doing this for King Midas. You know, it's just it's a known IP. Okay, but if you are doing your own story with your own characters, I highly encourage you to do this exercise, this bone structure exercise, or something very similar. Not just a D&D characters, not just a stat sheet, but really get into their brain and try and walk in their shoes a little bit. And you can do this ongoing as we move forward, right? You don't need to stop and do this for 15 characters before you go to the next video. But that's it. That's the takeaway. That's the takeaway. You have to, if you don't stop and do this work, you end up with cliches, and that people don't care about as much. So, next video, Rubber Hits the Road, narrative design. It might be a small series of videos where things are going to get nuts. We're going to get nuts, I'm telling you. So pack a lunch, bring some snacks. It's going to be a long night or two, but it's going to be fun, and it's going to be well worth it. And I think you're really going to enjoy yourself. If you're enjoying yourself at all, God bless you. But I think we'll really hit the ground running with our next couple of videos. Talk to you soon. Get out of here. Go home.